Hey guys, welcome to another episode of R-Rated Christianity. For those that watch us on a regular basis, thank you. I hope you enjoy watching these episodes as much as we like having them. For those that are new, welcome. This is an apologetics podcast. It comes from the Greek word apologia, to give an answer or defense of why we are biblically minded, why we believe Jesus is Messiah, he's God incarnate, why we believe we can trust the authority of that collection of books, that library of books that we call the Bible, and why living out Jesus's way of doing this thing called life, not only benefits us, but benefits the people around us and even strangers. And so that's what we do. The R stands for real, raw, and redemptive. We have real conversations, meaning relevant conversations and meaningful conversations, and we do it in a raw way, an authentic, genuine way. We try to get down and dirty about the stuff that you need to get down and dirty about, applying the Bible to life. But ultimately, these real and raw conversations hopefully lead someone to a redemptive relationship with Jesus Christ. Because that's what it's all about. It's not about us. It's not about what we think. Who gives a crap what we think? It's about what Jesus, the architect of life, thinks, God, and how he expects us to do life on this side of heaven, and what the meaning and purpose of life is. So with that being said, we're kind of on this politics kick, which is great, because we need to talk about that. We're in the political season, and the church seems to not know what to do during the political season. And we've dissected politics before. We've talked about it. I'm actually going to be on a panel discussion next week with Pastor Charles Flowers. We've had Charles on the show before. He's a dear friend of ours, not just of the show, but of me personally, and you too, George, I believe. But we're going to be talking about politics. We're going to be talking about the church's role in politics. Alliance Defending Freedom, I think, will be there. Sounds like a good lineup. And, I got a lot to say on it. And we've talked about this before. And the church, I think, has bought into really a false narrative, dare I say, deceptively, that the church should distance itself from political issues. Well, God's issues aren't political. They're just God's issues. He cares about everything. He's got an opinion about everything. And so what's a political issue today wasn't a political issue 15 years ago or 30 years ago, or whatever it was. There was a time so God doesn't care about what we think a political issue is. They're just issues. And so we need to talk about these things. If you look at, and you and I talked, and we have to verify some of these numbers, but these are roundabouts, right? There's like 90 million Americans that identify as Christian in this country. Roughly, the numbers say, many people have said that 40 million of those 90 will not vote. And I think you said last time we talked, another 15 million are not even registered to vote. So I thought it was you. So that's like 55 million Christians that aren't going to put their influence into determining who our leaders are going to be, because those leaders determine laws, and those laws affect our lives, and those lives can actually affect the church. And so we have to be political. And we talked about the definition of politics versus partisanship. But I just think that's such a bold-faced lie for the church to buy into, that we should not be political. We should. Matthew 28:19 is, as we've said, a political statement. Going to all nations, making the disciples of all men, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. Well, politics, as the working definition for us, is a set of ideas advocated by a group of people to affect the lives of others. That's Matthew 28:19 is a political statement, not a partisan one. It's political. Because if the Democrats or Republicans or independents support whatever, then who cares what the partisanship is irrelevant to the Christian.
Difference doesn't make it.
It's which platform will allow us and support us advocating biblical ideas. Mm-hmm. The Islamic person makes the same determination. The Jewish person should. The atheist, the agnostic, Hindu, the Buddhist. Everybody looks for a platform to advocate their ideas. And not all ideas are the same, and they want their ideas to win. Why wouldn't we? And so when we look at the church, 55 million, I mean, even if the number is even anywhere close to that accurate, is shameful. It's a stewardship issue. I think it's irresponsible. We're called to influence. There's been over and over again, example after example, from Nebuchadnezzar to the other example you gave, where prophets and people, champions in our faith that we study, spoke truth into power. So why wouldn't we want to do that? Of course we want to do that. It's happened all through the Old Testament, and we should do it now. Why wouldn't we want to have the king's ear? I mean, there's only one king, but you know what I mean, the person in charge's ear to influence them. And why wouldn't they want to come to the church for that wisdom? And so I just think it's such a bullshit lie. that the church has bought into for whatever reason. I don't know. But well, we have an idea of fear and ignorance and all the other stuff we've talked about in the past.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
how do we stand for Jesus in a failing society? We've been feared into running from Jesus as a whole. We've been called names into separating ourselves from Jesus. And a lot of people are embarrassed of the ideas or ideas of the Bible. I was talking to my brother who's running for office, and we were just talking about real practical ways to advocate biblical ideas of his faith, because he's being attacked for his faith like I was when I was running for office. Sure. But there's a way to talk to people about it. We need to educate people about how to do that and stand for it and want to put people in office that will adhere to and advocate for because a biblical idea from our point of view will bless the masses. I mean, we believe that. I know that for a fact. I mean, I think we can probably put some data points on that when you violate a biblical principle or biblical principles in a society, that society has problems. I mean, from the 10 Commandments, that have made its way into our penal system to other aspects of our faith. So that's kind of where we're going to go today. We'll just kind of chew on that for a while. And so I don't know where you want to go with that, George, but I think it's just kind of a good launching point for us.
When you say come back to biblical ideals, this isn't about force converting anybody.
No.
It's not even about converting anybody. A nation has to pick how it's going to be governed. It has to pick upon which principles it will build itself. And our founders made that choice. Yep. And a lot of people have no idea the basis for making those choices back then, almost 250 years ago. And I think that's part of the problem, Nico. We've talked about it many times in here and even on Sidebar on Saturday mornings, where we talk a lot about the intersection of politics and culture. Yep. On our show there, is that we don't know our own history. We don't know where we come from. So we're just sort of, I almost feel like, we're out there hovering around as a nation. We don't seem anchored, and we seem like we're floating around. And where we really saw this, I think, is in the age of COVID, just 4 years ago. It feels like it was 100 years ago.
It feels like so long.
It's frightening that it wasn't, because of what happened. And what happened is it was really one giant experiment that I think revealed how far American citizens are from their history, are from their cultural distinctives, the idea of, American autonomy, the freedom of the citizen to decide how the citizen is going to think about anything. The freedom of the citizen to decide how and when to advocate for something that they think is important to them. And we saw a wave of censorship descend upon this country that was heralded and shepherded by the United States government, of all people. And I haven't seen anything before it, and I have a feeling, in a sense, that it's just the beginning. And so in this political season, you and I were chatting before the show, I get a sense that people don't believe that that's in the past, that remains here. This tendency to, the tendency of the United States government to amass power and, as it sees fit, use that power to prevent people from speaking their minds and their consciences, and prevent people from making very important decisions. What decision is more personal than a healthcare decision? I mean, that hit at the core. I mean, people literally had no control over their own bodies anymore. And so I think there's a sense that people haven't been held accountable for those abuses. We're talking about the government. We're talking about a biomedical complex. I mean, from doctors to nurses to therapists to everyone in between, institutions. There was just even churches, Nico, that seemed to sort of align with this wave.
Yeah, I saw that.
And there didn't seem to be any pushback. And where's the day of reckoning, and when? There literally been no accountability. And I think there's a sense that hasn't been addressed. And so people are tense that those issues are on the table very much so in this election. And they're worried. They're worried that it hasn't gone away, but it's just sort of regrouping. And so what is the role of the church now? I mean, the church ought to be able to look back and be ashamed of the positions that it took in many cases, it took no position to just sort of adopted this kind of herd instinct and went along with the wave. Has the church learned anything? I haven't heard anybody really talk about it. Have we looked back and come up with corrective actions?
Who have we heard repent from it?
Oh man,
it's such
no reflection.
We don't even know what we believe. So, you hear people say, "My body, my choice," and then they abandon that mindset when it came to forcing shots on people. And then you say, "Well, if you can't control your own autonomy, I can see someone trying to use your words against us, saying, well, yeah, that's why it's my choice on abortion." Well, your body, your choice, not someone else's body, your choice. There's a difference. So we make this distinction. We know scientifically and biologically, the people that said follow the science all of a sudden don't want to follow the science when it's convenient. And so that's when when there's a principle versus a perspective. A perspective is your opinion, may or may not be accurate or not. A principle is something that will stand true when it's in your favor and when it's not in your favor. That's when you hold a principle.
It's an anchor.
It's an anchor. Well, there you go. It's an anchor. Exactly. That's a good way to describe it. It's an anchor. And so these people talk in these terms of principle and what's right and what's moral and what's good and what's evil and all this other shit, but they don't anchor it to a definition and a source. You got to source it. And so we came along and saw this, we as a society and as a country, and we saw the church fold. For the most part, not all. There were some churches, and the churches in California are on the front lines.
There were pockets of hope and sanity.
Yeah. But we're not far away from in Houston when government was asking for sermons of pastors.
Sure.
This is just in Houston, Texas. That's kind of dissipated. People forgotten about
COVID.
That was before COVID. Yeah. That's my point.
So, yeah.
But it's just all these, they're pushing the envelope.
Sort of creeping in that
direction. You give
an
inch and they'll take a mile type deal. And a lot of people, and look, how can you deny this, think that COVID was that experiment, that test.
But that herd mentality, and I'm glad you brought that up, it's not like it started during COVID. COVID was a test, really, I think in many ways, of the way things were already. How susceptible are people to this herd instinct, this notion that a narrative is so powerful in the culture that so few people will have the courage to stand against it. This worldview, this ideology is already so embedded in a culture. And what is that ideology? It's really sort of this tendency toward collectivism. I don't want to be the oddball. I don't want to be that guy. Yeah. It's like I'm more afraid of that than the loss of my own freedom. Yeah. It's craziness. And I think that's where we are. You've said it differently. You've said it, the church is addicted to being liked. That's kind of the same thing. Yeah. Not kind of, it is the same thing.
Well, we're trained. If someone who liked my post, how many people have liked, why don't I have as many likes? People do that shit. And we're addicted to this idea of being accepted and liked. Yeah. And what Jesus tells us in John 15 is, in this world, they're going to hate you, but they hated me first.
That's right.
John 16:33, in this world you will have trouble. Trouble means someone didn't like you. They're coming after you. So we're told this and we're warned this.
And then in the next chapter, sorry to interrupt you, but in the next chapter, he prays for his disciples.
In 17.
Present and then future.
Correct.
And then actually says that he asked the Father that they would be sanctified by the truth, that they would be set apart by the truth. That's an invitation to conflict.
Yeah.
The truth necessarily brings conflict because the truth
is exclusive.
Something's not true.
Yeah, by definition, truth is exclusive.
By definition. And so Jesus was setting up his disciples for conflict. And he made no bones about it. And he talked about it repeatedly. And then he foreshadowed that to you and me today. And we don't like that. It's amazing that the lengths that the church even given Jesus' mandate, because this is the cost of discipleship that Dietrich Bonhoeffer spoke of. If anyone would know, he knew, right? As he stood up to Nazis, the Nazi government in 1942 and 1943, before he lost his life in a concentration camp. And he didn't lose his life because he was Jewish. He lost his life because he stood against Nazi fascism. That's why he lost his life, because he wouldn't toe the line, because he pointed out not just what the Nazis were doing, but he pointed out the softness inside the German church and pointed out piece by piece how they were complying with evil, blatant evil. And
kind of what John the Baptist did, right, to Herod?
Sure. Right? Speaking truth
to power.
To power. I mean, if anyone did that, it was Jesus. But I thought about Bonhoeffer because even though that seems ancient, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, we're talking about 81 years ago, really, wasn't that long ago. In the scope of human history, it's nothing. And so I think people get a sense that there's this kind of governing anti-Christian, anti-freedom, anti-autonomy, really anti-American narrative that is so deep-seated in a culture and is now sort of governing policy. And when it came time for us to test exactly what we believed as a Christian church, I think we were found wanting in 2020. I mean, you could see it in March of 2020. It was pretty much
Churches were shutting down, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And over the next 6 months, it was unbelievable chaos, and the churches were nowhere to be found.
As they saw the titty bar staying open, as they saw the liquor store staying open, as they saw fill in the blank. I mean, but the church has to shut down? Exactly. Why? Because they didn't want people to gather and to think and to share ideas. They want separate. How do you win? Sure. Divide and conquer. If you have an army, you have to divide and conquer the army to get. That's what the devil does too. It's like when you think about a pride of lions. Mm-hmm. Or lions looking at a herd of zebra. Really, so you have this herd of zebra, and the lion, the pride separates. Very similar to 1 Peter 5, right? The devil prowls like a lion, is waiting, but doesn't attack the herd together. Mm-hmm. When you think about the herd, they're strong in numbers. Sure, they wait for the one to fall away. They wait for the divide and conquer, the old, the sick, the young to break away. And then they get them by onesies. They don't go in 20 lions or 20 tigers or 20 whatever at killing 20 zebras. They can't do it because they're strong in numbers. So that's why, in my humble opinion, why they didn't want the church. They don't need people to resist. They don't need the true resistance, which the church should resist anything without being a good citizen, but should resist deception. Mm-hmm. And that's why we came down so hard back then, George, on even people like Franklin Graham, who said some stupid shit, like Jesus would have taken the vaccine. Says who? And now that we know all the deception that undergirded that whole movement, that put, warp speed and all this other crap, I don't care who advocated it, they were wrong. Scientifically, practically, logically, they were wrong. Yep. Period. End of story. And now we have the data. We do. And so why would you say something like that? So irresponsible. But it's that whole fallen in line syndrome and don't want to be the odd man out instead of asking good questions. And then you have people like Joe Rogan who's asking good questions and had the influence and the autonomy to say bullshit. I'm going to call bullshit on this deal. I'm allowed to ask questions and I'm allowed to be wrong. Well, it's misinformation. It's dangerous. Well, you're allowed to sell cigarettes. I don't understand the point.
But with respect, there was really nobody with a public that I remember. Okay. Very few people with a public voice. And I have to say, maybe Alex Berenson. Maybe.
Well, he was good. We were sharing a lot of stuff.
I'm about to compliment him. There was very few people with a big microphone.
He didn't have a big microphone
from the very beginning. I mean, he's a published author in New York Times. Yeah, but New York Times. I mean, he was out there. He had pretty good following. But yes, to your point, there was nobody in the hundreds of millions. There was nobody with a major government position who was willing to lead the opposition right from the very beginning.
Not initially.
And say this is completely outrageous. This is nuts. This is control being ushered in under the pretext of compassion for the purposes of conditioning people to be controlled. Let's talk about alliteration. But conditioning, this is really what ended up happening. People were conditioned to be controlled. Yep. And you're right, nobody from the very get-go said, this is unacceptable.
Think about what the government did. The government came in and said, shut down your business.
Yes, absolutely.
Shut down your church.
Right.
Keep open your liquor store.
Right, the 15-day stop the spread.
Turned into what?
And there were people who were saying, it's not 50, what's that going to do?
Yeah.
And by that time, and remember, you and I were on the phone because we didn't have a microphone, but I was saying that. Yeah. I was saying that long before March of 2020.
Well, I think you and I were talking about this, and you're my quote unquote expert that I rely on when I go to my expert witness. But I think everybody was, and I don't begrudge anybody for saying, okay, if it's truly 15 days, let's kind of take our temperature. Let's find out. Let's do some recon. Figure out what this is, because nobody knew exactly what it was initially, right?
Right, but I wasn't saying that.
I don't remember. I don't know.
Because
I thought you said you were okay with 15 days.
Hold up. Okay. My background, as you know, is in clinical ops.
Yes.
So I spent a lot of my adult career in clinical operations, in clinical research. So from a political standpoint, okay, but it didn't make any sense. Remember, I kept saying we're tossing out 50 years of immunology.
You
We're,
did say, I
we're
remember that.
tossing out everything we know about personal protective equipment, the 3 and the 6 foot rule. Give me a break. We had Fauci at the end of March
saying
out there.
that these masks are worthless.
Sure, saying it's a joke. It'll make you feel good, but it won't do anything.
Yeah.
I think it was March 31st.
60 minutes.
March 8th, and he was out there twice. I seem to remember March 8th and March 31st of 2020. Yes, on 60 Minutes, where he was saying, okay, it'll make you feel better, but at the end of the day, it's not really going to do anything. Right. That is, he was in fact actually saying what we know to be true about cloth and facial surgical masks. They're not going to stop the spread of a virus, particularly an influenza airborne virus. It's not going to happen. And you know all the reasons why we went through it at the time. Right. And so politically, okay, we're going to show that we're going to be reasonable. But virally speaking, from a virological standpoint, makes zero sense. What's that going to do? Now, here's why. Remember I said to you, we already know who it's killing, and we already know how many. We knew it was the most susceptible people, not to get into a COVID discussion right now, but these are the kinds of conversations that were being had across the country, but nobody with a microphone who knew that, and probably had people advising them, had the balls and the clarity of mind to say the things that we were saying in private conversations on the phone. And then, of course, we were on sidebar, and we were doing everything we could.
Ironically, if there is anything that came good out of it, other than the fact that people know what the government is capable of doing and how ignorant they are and how the experts can be wrong, trust the science. Well, the science, whatever your science was wrong, whatever that means.
Sure.
I mean, we knew that for a fact. And so when we were analyzing that situation, I'm trying to think of where I was going to go. I was going to say something. I said science, and then it threw me off for a second. But we
started about talking about COVID on sidebar.
Got it. And thank you for correcting me. Thank you for reminding me. So it was me and Karen just a little side note for fun fact. Karen and I were on sidebar for X amount of period of time, like the first year or whatever it was, 10 months to a year. And it was just something that we were doing, Jeff, for the firm, talking about legal issues, some current events, just kind of jawing it up, right? Just bullshitting. And then all this fiasco happened. I was like, well, shit, George, chemist, worked for clinical ops, worked for different pharmaceutical companies.
Treasure trove here.
I mean, I'm bringing his ass in as my, legal expert witness on as I do in trial. And we brought you in on 1 week, and then COVID was the main topic for months and months and months.
No, it's not like this was earth-shattering news. I was simply parroting what you knew. This is
right.
Again, it's immunology 101.
But you're not the only person that knew that.
No, of course not. They all knew that.
They all knew it.
The reality is, you don't quarantine an entire nation. You quarantine
the sick.
high risk groups, and you isolate those, and you study them, and you kind of watch them, and you provide managed care to those individuals. You don't shut down a nation. It's insane. Now, it's an influenza-like virus. It wasn't an influenza virus, but it behaved like one. And so we knew how it behaved. We know, because even though the flu isn't the same, it's not a coronavirus, it behaves very similarly. In terms of particulate size, it's very much the same size. It's gonna operate the same way. It's gonna live and die similarly. In terms of how it mutates, similarly. And I told you, it is a shitty idea to have vaccines for any kind of influenza virus. It's not exactly working out well for the flu. I mean, really, people are vaccinated for the flu, and we know
how that works out.
We know the efficacy rate. It's not wonderful because the mutation rate is so significant. You can't chase it fast enough, and this is why they blew off any kind of meaningful clinical testing, because they're trying to chase a series of mutations, or whatever the dominant strain is in the society at the time, or in the culture at the time. It's a fool's errand, and at the end of the day, it translates to a paycheck. That's why it's done. Wow. We'll get into that some other time. But the point is, a lot of people knew the truth. Nobody had the balls to speak up, and I can't believe that the church hightailed it. In the name of what? Being compassionate,
safety,
being reasonable,
safety, right?
Being liked, safetyism. And this is what I want to get back to, because you asked me at the beginning. I think this is where we ought to park for a little bit and challenge people who are listening. And that is, when this happens again, and it will, because governments can't resist the temptation to try to control people. Yeah. They just can't. That's the nature of power. That's what this is about. This is about power. And what's going to be the church's response? Have we learned anything from what happened during the COVID era? What have we learned? Do we recognize that the long-term goal here is power acquisition? What stance are we going to take? You know, are we teaching our people? Are we asking them to reflect on what's happened? And even ask them to reflect personally. What kind of decisions did you make? What kinds of autonomies did you sort of blow off just so you could fit in? Why didn't you take a stand maybe when you should have, when it was blatantly stupid to be walking a dog by yourself
with a mask
on?
So stupid.
To be driving in a truck by yourself with a mask on.
It drove me insane.
Do we see ourselves doing those kinds of asinine things? And not to get into the idea of, I mean, we could, shutting down worship. I mean, literally, churches couldn't go to church and gather on Sundays.
On outdoor services.
To worship.
Either. On outdoors,
even on outdoor services.
It was so. Look,
people being arrested. They're standing there by themselves.
I saw
on the effing beach.
I saw this,
and they're getting arrested.
I saw this one dumb dick running on outside with a mask on. I have his picture here somewhere. Maya was like, "Papi, stop!" He's across. I'm trying to. I said, I need a picture of the stupidity, because that's fool. You're running out, so sweating, coming out, fog everywhere, with a stupid cloth over the diaper over your face.
At some point, the amount of carbon monoxide that's coming back in, carbon dioxide that's coming back in, not really great for you.
No.
Right? I mean, trees love it.
And we knew, and then very shortly after that, it wasn't right away, we knew more information that people with up to 4 comorbidities were the ones dying. These, with all due respect, and I say this,
and the CDC was putting that data.
They knew
out.
that. They knew it. But my point is, let's back to the church. Where's the church's role in being the watch person on the wall?
Yes.
Is it Ezekiel 33, right? The watchman on the wall. That's what the church is. Ezekiel 33, right? Where the church is supposed to function in that role, to be the watchman. To keep an eye out for society, to be the truth arbiter, to say, hey, wait a minute, truth comes from God. It's transcendent, it's real, it's universal, exclusive. And it comes from God. He's the author of life. And they used to have influence over that, but they very openly handed that role over to the government. And that's not part of our societal checks and balance.
But we could see it. I mean, we could see it. We were watching it. We were talking about it. We could see that this was a play on power, and it was a play on centralizing power and really controlling everybody's decisions down to a gnat's ass, where you could go, when you could go. I can't believe I heard the
people
term
died
essential
alone.
Businesses. I mean, that freaked me out.
Do you have a list of the essential business? What were they again?
It was like Walmart.
No,
Target.
do we have an official list? I know.
Oh, yeah.
Do we have an official list?
I do. I have it.
Okay.
Actually,
It was always the big
I have it
stores,
in my
yeah.
COVID archive.
Well, but one of them was liquor
mine was an
stores.
essential
Oh, right,
business.
yeah.
Mine was essential business because
Strip
we were
clubs and
providing
all that.
housing for people.
Right.
So that was an essential
Strip
business.
clubs and everything. Right. You're right.
Was I right about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Oh,
But the German Bonhoeffer
know.
reference. You guys it's the same parallel. The strip clubs were open. All these things were open.
But the one that drove me insane, since we're just going down memory lane, was I'd be at a restaurant and I never wore a mask ever. When I had to go to Costco, because I almost got in a fight in Costco one time, talking to ignorant people,
right.
I wore a bandana. I went George style. But I did it over my face on purpose, because a year earlier I would have gotten shot for walking into a store with a bandana. So I wanted to do one of these.
Yeah.
Just here's how stupid you are. You're okay with me wearing a bandana,
And
an
you're looking
open
at
at
the
the
camera.
bottom bandana, open at the bottom, loose on the sides bandana, to go into shop at Costco. That's how stupid you are. But the thing that drove me insane was when I'd go to eat at the place that I normally eat every day, and I'm sitting down eating my healthy meal, salad, and you'd see some person walk in with a mask on, then take it off and put it on the desk, on the table,
Put it back on.
as they sit down, as if the virus knows, oh, he's at home base, sitting at the
Remember
table.
that? Oh, yeah.
The level of ignorance was earth-shattering to me. It really was. And there's no logic.
But you see, and yet we step back and we say, in a sense, if you're trying to control and manipulate people, if you're trying to detach people from what they know is true and embrace something they know is stupid, it's actually quite brilliant the way they did it, because it's the government and it was all the institutions in which we've put tons of credibility in this country that have traditionally operated by constitutional norms, institutions that have pushed back on the government, media that is in place to actually speak truth to power on behalf of the citizen. They didn't do their job.
Nope.
And what we saw was this kind of collusion, dare I use that word, between institutions, even the biomedical complex, the United States government, and the media, all the way down to to local institutions, local governments, just sort of lining up. And what you saw was really a lesson in how propaganda works. And this is why we spent so much time talking about propaganda, this idea that the purpose of propaganda is to literally reshape a person's view of reality, and they basically reimagine reality, to use a Democrat word. You basically reimagine it. You appeal to human fears and desires. And it literally bypasses your ability to think, straight to your emotions. And you saw the church line up with this, even though they knew that human beings were going to get hurt in the end. To put that kind of power and decision-making power in the hands of the government, people who don't give two shits about your family, who don't know anything about your family's plight, literally people who aren't able to access their loved ones at a clinic or at a hospital in an ICU.
Man,
I mean, I would have drawn the line. Are you kidding me? I don't care if you arrest me. And you and I were on sidebar talking about, well, let's see, can they legitimately arrest you for that? Remember, people were asking you questions.
Yeah.
Can the government do that? That was the most popular question we would get. Can they do that, Nico? Can they do that? And you would say, well, they can, but what do you?
Whether it holds up in the end or not, I mean, it'd be under criminal trespass
gonna
because they're telling you to leave or do something and then you don't. And whether they have the right, that's where you have the right to kick people out for whatever you want to. So look, it was an exercise, and I hope it revealed. And look, if someone felt, I respect someone that would say, I was just wrong. I was wrong. I mean, Megyn Kelly says that about taking the shot. Other people do too. They I was just wrong and I regret it. That's repentive. That's a repentive heart. There's nothing wrong with that. That's someone that said, I really wanted to get it right. And I was either misinformed or I was fearful or a combination of the both. I can work with that all day long because that's what God did for me. When I go to him and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I'm repenting, changing my way. I'm course correcting. And I'm sorry enough to do things differently, not sorry that I got caught or got stuck up somewhere. And so I can work with that. But there's been nobody held accountable to your point, George.
On the Megyn point, she has changed a lot in the last 10 years, like 2015, 2016, how she was kind of hostile to almost not conservative ideas, but just she was very much in the middle. And now I think she's seen the craziness and she finally has had a wake-up call. And you can see a lot of growth and change and what she holds to now.
Well, look, may we all do that.
Yeah.
May we all mature. May we all, I'm not trying to use the word evolve, but I mean, sanctify ourselves, get closer to God, open our ears wider. That's what I tell. If somebody is sanctifying themselves, their eyes are open, their ears are open, their heart's ready to receive, and they're ready to course correct because they're looking for Christ for the answers. That's what the Christians should be doing. But then how do we represent that to a world? How do we talk about politics? How do we address issues with information, with courage, with humility, with wisdom? And you have to pray for that, James 1:5. And we need to arm ourselves with this. The church has got to get involved. And 55 million Christians not getting involved in the political process doesn't do it for us. Because you don't think the church, the Christian influence should be a major player in politics. People should be seeking out not some imam or Hindu or Buddhist organization. They can, don't get me wrong, they have a right to be heard as well. But we have the numbers, allegedly, and we should have the influence. There's no reason why a biblical set of ideas, again, not evangelizing someone, not forcing them to be a Christian, which you can't force anyone, but you know what I mean, should be blessing the country. We should. And for us to not do that, I think it's irresponsible. I think any church that says you should not be involved in politics should not be a church, to be honest with you.
But we're not united.
It's easy. We're divided.
We lack unity, and we've had a secular movement that has co-opted Christian language to do the bidding of a secular theology. I mean, we don't know what we believe about sexual purity. We have no idea on marriage. We won't take a stand against that because we might offend somebody. We don't know what we believe in terms of the sanctity of human life. We've talked about many times in here. We won't defend that because it's politically incorrect and because there's such a split in the church even on those issues. I mean, for goodness sakes, we have disunity on things that we should have no disunity about. Things like the age of the earth, a raging debate inside the church over which people will go to each other's throats over. We have disunity about that.
We'll say what our position is.
He pointed at me as he said that.
I'm just
The
giving
old, that was the old you. No, but my point is, because somebody doesn't watch every show for years, they won't know our position. We take the position that the Earth is 4 billion, roughly 3.8 to 4.3 billion years old, and the universe is close to 14 billion years old. But we do not believe in evolution. We give or take. Yeah, give or take 100 million. But we do not believe in evolution because there's no evidence of it. Could God have used it? Of course he could have, but there's no evidence that he did. And it's clear, by the way, and even the evolutionist has a problem with that. It's dead. You know, Darwin's doubt, and we've talked about all that stuff. And David, is it David Berlinski? You're not even a Christian.
Brilliant mathematician.
Darwin's out with Stephen C. Meyer.
I know, Stephen. I'm sorry.
David
Yes,
Berlinski.
I'm thinking of the podcast where Stephen Meyer, Berlinski, and another David.
Hoover Institute. They
Yeah,
do
but
a
it
lot
was
of-
David. Who's the third David? He was another. He wasn't as educated as Berlinski, but he's another David. I can see his face, but I can't think of his last name. But that's all I meant. I didn't mean to time to Darwin's doubt. Yes, that was Dr. Myers. But all I'm saying is we take that position because you said age of the earth, and I hear way too many Christians talk about 6 days creation and seventh God rested, which he didn't have to rest. Okay, we talked about that today in Hebrews 4. Okay, that's a different podcast. I just had to say it because I don't want anyone to think. I want us to be clear about our position, and I think it's a biblical
examples of where
I know,
of
brother.
where secular views have so infiltrated the church that they've so poisoned our thinking. We don't actually really know what we believe, and some of the tensions that exist within the church are because those ideologies have been pretty inculcated in the way we think too. So in other words, we've co-opted those things. We're actually parroting things that are not biblical at all, and I think that's terribly unfortunate. I don't know in the event something like this happens again, and unfortunately, I believe it could and it probably will. What happened in the age of COVID, I just simply don't know that we have the intellectual and the spiritual maturity resources to be able to push back. And I just admit it. I'm concerned about it. It's a subject of prayer of mine. I carry it as a burden. I ask that the Lord would spare us from our ignorance like that, and that God would make us hungry for the truth and fill us with the courage to fight for it. Because at the end of the day, man, I mean, why are we doing this? Our kids are going to have to live in the world that we're creating.
Brother, here's what I tell you.
That's what
How many
burdens me
times
the
you've heard?
most.
If you had a quarter every time you heard me say this, but I'm going to keep saying it until the Lord calls me home. Be careful of the world you help create, because someday you may have to live in it. It's that simple. I mean, and look, I just read this with Jeff before we started the show today. Anna Kasparian, whatever her name is,
from the Young Turks.
from the Young Turks, very left-leaning, progressive podcast, political influencers, and she's been leaning, and she's been on more conservative libertarian shows. She's having and she says she just left the Democrat Party, that's her choice, and she's not a Christian, from my understanding.
Not at all.
But because she claims that she was sexually assaulted by a homeless person in 2022. And when she said that, people attacked her
On the left, yeah.
on the left in that set of ideas, right? For bringing disparaging remarks to homeless people. What is it called? Your unhoused neighbor. Unhoused neighbor. They're homeless, asshole. Just say what it is.
It's unhinged.
And she said she was shocked. And I'm not.
He was
I'm not.
assaulting her and laughing, and she told the story, and they're victim shaming her.
Yeah.
That she
Called him homeless versus a homeless neighbor. He's not your neighbor. Your neighbor lives next to you. This guy's walking around, doing shit to people. But my point is,
Can't make this stuff up.
this is an ideology. It's a cult.
It really
it's
is.
cultish.
Yeah.
It's a religion.
Yes.
And so she saw the true effects of the ideas that she promulgated, thinking they're not going to touch me. And what I always challenge people is, what you're advocating, whatever you're advocating, is it okay if what you're advocating applies to you and your loved ones?
Sure.
If it is, then you believe it.
You
And you don't know until it happens, by the way.
You have to be willing to stand up for what is obviously and objectively true. You mentioned she's not a believer. I was thinking about an Enlightenment writer and
I'd love to talk to her, by the way.
Enlightenment writer and satirist by the name of Voltaire. And Voltaire said that those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit absurdities.
Well, yeah,
and
because
it's
as a man thinks, so he is, of
Because
course.
exactly, if people can be made to believe a lie, they're going to live as if the lie is the truth.
Sure.
And that was his point. And that's where we are as a culture. We know that's where we are as a culture. We're not sitting here wondering, I wonder if this happened. This has already happened, and we haven't really taken steps. We haven't been very serious over the last 4 years, in my view. And I'm concerned about it. And it's a burden of prayer for mine. It really is, that the church would wake up to the consequential nature of that, because this will happen again. This election is a pivotal election. Forget just the
think it
candidates for a moment. We have
think it
two
is.
very different visions of the country. I really don't give a shit about the fact that you think Trump is brash, that you think he exaggerates. I don't care about that. I don't care that you don't like his hair. I don't care that you think he weighs too much. That you don't like his diet. That you don't like the way he talks, the way he moves his hands.
What about his fake tan?
I don't care. And his fake tan. Can't forget the orange man. That doesn't really matter. We know Trump's been the president of the United States, and we know what this country was like in those 4 years.
Sure.
We know what policies were economically. We know what they were foreign policy. We know his position on illegal immigration, on law enforcement. We know this guy's not a mystery. So setting aside whatever idiosyncrasies you don't like, focus on that, because the other side, his opponent, also has none that she's articulated, but that party has a set of policies. It has a worldview. It has a platform. And it's diametrically opposed to autonomy. It is supportive of censorship. Why? Because we've seen a machinery of censorship unleashed on the American public since January of 21. I don't have to be a genius to see it. So do you want your kids to grow up in a world where they can express who God created them to be? Or do they have to wonder all the time if they're using the right set of words in a particular way? Because if that's what you want for them, then you're actually forcing them to think a certain way. Your kid's going to be in a prison, and his kids are going to be in a prison. That is what's before us here. It's got nothing to do with the personalities.
And I don't understand
it's the
why
platforms,
right?
the policies.
And you have to think about that, because those platforms are an expression of ideas. So you're really supporting the ideas that the candidate. If you like the candidate, that's a bonus. You're really voting for their ideas.
Yes.
And so the fact that the Christian, and maybe that's why 55 million Christians don't vote, because they think they have to be voting for Jesus himself, which is asinine. It irritates the living shit out of me, and it makes me want to really be harsh with church people. They take that position, and then we wonder why the world's going to hell in a handbasket, because our leaders are so off the roots. Again, whether you like Christianity or not, you cannot objectively and historically deny that the ideas of the Judeo-Christian worldview undergird our country. That's just a fact. I mean, we can debate that, and we've done shows on that, and other great scholars and educated people can advocate it better than us probably. I'm just saying, but that's a fact. And so we wonder why. What are you waiting? What are you doing? Have you not studied the book of Judges? Have you not realized that Israel put themselves in a shithole 12 times over? That they rejected God, and they were disobedient, like Moses coming into Canaan, into the promised land, and that's why he never got in there. We've been teaching on that, right, in Hebrews. 11 days it should have taken to get into the promised land. It took them 40 damn years because they're a bunch of dumbasses. And so here's Israel once again, and then they reject God, and then they get themselves in a shithole, and then God sends these 12 judges, and I don't know any of them that were altar boys. But they're flawed people. But God can use anything to accomplish a purpose. Yes. And then they repent, and they go all over again. This talk about recidivism rate, recidivism, repeat offenders, all of them. God is so gracious, and He didn't send in a pastor. Yep. He didn't send in. I mean, whatever you want to fill in the blank, a disciple or a prophet. He sent in some broken ass people to do some shitty things that needed to be done to get them saved and get them back on their repent. And so it really shocks me, the level of ignorance and wussification of the church.
And God has a position. He's and in fact, it occurs to me, Malachi chapter 2, which is always bastardized to talk endlessly about tithing, right? in the New Testament church, which drives me crazy because it's not applicable. Malachi chapter 2, verse 17.
Open the windows of heaven.
No, let's continue. We might actually
Test me.
We might actually get some context here.
Yes, go ahead.
In Malachi chapter 2,
No compulsion.
verse 17. For centuries, false prophets had been spewing propaganda. And God said that he was wearied by it. That's the word that he used. He was wearied with their words. And what words were they using? He says, you guys have wearied me. You do evil in the sight of the Lord and you call it good.
It sounds like Isaiah 5:20, right?
Right. And then you say that I delight in it.
That's worse.
You carried your assassination.
Damn. Yeah.
And he says, and then when there's consequences, they're like, where's the God of justice? As if I'm being unjust. And God is outraged by that. That's propaganda. That's literally telling people what they want to hear,
Yes.
and then giving them what you want them to have. That's literally what that is. It's a total spin. And the point is, we have lots of historical precedent. The church is, I like your point earlier, we're best equipped. We really are. We've been given the truth. We have God's living word. We've been charged with testifying and pursuing the truth. We're very well positioned. We have the resources. We're not united and we're ignorant.
Yes.
Terrible combination. And so if you're listening in, the most important thing you could be doing right now is truly praying for your pastor. Really. And praying that God would help him
Encourage
to
him.
rise up.
Yeah, encourage
to
him.
rise up. To stand fast on what is true. To learn what is true. But
fear
to stand
man.
fast on what he knows to be true. And to pray that would spread like wildfire. I would love to see that happen in church, because revival isn't going to happen before that, but it will happen after it. When the church comes together, Nico, and stands fast on the truth of the gospel, there will be revival, truly. Because what we're saying is that God can trust us. We are trustworthy. We've been given a charge, and the little that we know, we're united around it, and we're being faithful with it, so now we can handle
Can we
more.
give an example? You know where I'm going to go with this, right? Who am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about the famous,
Some things are just...
well, President Bukele from El Salvador. Think about that. And what George is saying, I think, plays out in a smaller venue, that country.
We're going to see God.
But El Salvador...
You're going to piss off all kinds of people with this example, but
I don't give a shit.
I think it's a good example.
well,
But go ahead.
how would they get pissed off?
What an amazing speech.
Dictator. How dare you talk that
A
way?
benevolent dictator, maybe, right? But my point is this. My point is...
For a loop. They think those things are mutually exclusive. They're actually not. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, you can clean it up. But my point is this. I mean, I know it's not a constitutional republic. Got it, check. But the point is, they went from the murder capital of South America, wherever it was, their region, the most murder. I mean, the economy sucked. The people were in prison, literally and figuratively, in society. There was no tourism, nothing. He comes in and says, bullshit. And he talks about this. If you can look up his interviews, he prayed. His cabinet, they prayed. Why did you pray? Why wouldn't I pray?
Yeah.
Don't we know that this is truly a battle of good and evil? But he meant it. He meant biblical good and evil, not bullshit definition of good and evil. And they prayed for wisdom, James 1:5. Wisdom is found in the counsel of many. Proverbs tells us that. And he brought people together and he applied these ideas, and he prayed to a transcendent God that can do anything. And then he brought courage to the table, and he brought logic and brought wisdom from other people. And he stood steadfast. And yes, he was harsh. Yes, he was harsh to harsh people. And look, there is...
Well, it's the policy of mano dura,
well,
iron fist.
yes, but and look as a lawyer that believes in the Constitution you have to be very careful. It is a slippery slope. I get it.
But it's not against the granny praying outside a pregnancy
No,
clinic.
Daddy, no.
It's not against her. You can talk to our Department of Justice about that.
but we have to be careful because Lady Justice wears a blindfold.
Fair enough.
But
So-
all I'm saying is they were in extreme situation.
They were.
So extreme measures had to be taken. That's
He
it.
pulled the Solomon. He asked for God's wisdom.
People are wondering. He came into
I
power.
will listen and agree with the slippery slope argument, and I think we all do as constitutional advocates here. Me working with the Constitution daily, I've prosecuted, defended. It's a very slippery slope. Because if it's okay for a benevolent dictator, then it's got to be okay for a non-benevolent dictator.
But see, I think what we're saying here is politically and even sociologically that when you are not a steward of the freedoms that you're given, you do actually end up in a dictatorship.
Yes.
In the beginning, you end up in a dictatorship because you're asleep at the wheel, and you end up with one type of dictator who runs roughshod. And that's got to work its way, if you look historically in governments, it's got to work its way through the system. It doesn't get corrected the next year. Okay, because those assholes, once they're inculcated, once they're embedded, it takes a while to get them out. They don't go out the easy way, and then it takes another dictatorship to get them out.
Yeah,
violence begets violence,
and then it's almost
flirting.
like the movie The Gladiator, where then you can hand it back over to the people, right? Yeah. In the movie The Gladiator, you wanted to give it back to the people once he.
But you don't want to go down that road.
No,
it is a bloody mess.
There's no need to,
and there's no guarantee that it's going to get cleaned up. That's the problem.
But how
you're going to have an abuse
how are we
cycle.
not on the way to that? How are we not on the way when the Catholic advocate is praying across an abortion clinic, and some maniac comes across to start cussing and threatening his 12-year-old son, and he says, leave him alone, and all he did was push him. And then state prosecutors say, I'm not prosecuting that case. Defense of third person, self-defense.
You're talking about Mark Houck.
Yeah, Mark Houck. You came to him, but the DOJ comes in and prosecutes this guy. Thank God there was a jury that said no and acquitted him, but he had to go through that bullshit. We're not far away where you're getting canceled.
True.
Turkey this off. Trump is taken off of. Bobby Kennedy's taken off of Instagram. Everybody's taken off because some interior whatever group of truth, like from 1984. What's that organization? That department called? The
Ministry of Truth.
The Ministry of Truth. Thank you, Daddy. I was having a brain freeze.
I thought you wanted to know what Biden's version of that, which was the Disinformation Bureau or whatever.
But it's the same idea. It's the same where they get to determine what's misinformation.
Sure, exactly.
They get to determine in 1984 what's truth.
Yeah.
And that's like bullshit. A constitutional republic with a First Amendment that says you have free speech. You have a right to be an idiot. You have a right to be wrong. You have and the arena of the public, the courtroom, the public courtroom, the court of public opinion gets to vet that out and gets to be the final arbiter to say, you're full of shit. Mm-hmm. We're not going to pay attention to you. But the sharing, how do you know an idea is bad or good?
You have to hear it.
You share them. Because you share an idea, I share an idea, and then the crowd goes, Nico, you're stupid as hell. Jeff, you're right. But I had to share it for that to be vetted out. That's how this thing works. Now I get it. When you get to, there's always that exception, like what they did to Jesus. Well, can you remarry? What about if the brother died? And what about if the brother died? What if the brother died? And this stupid far end exception where Jesus said, how about 22.
This? Yeah, the
Sadducees. And what was his answer?
Nobody's married in heaven. How about that, asshole? And oh man, well, guess nobody's married in heaven. Yeah. So yes.
And by the way, yesterday you believe that. Remember, you guys are ones who don't believe in a resurrection. So he actually put
all I'm saying is, of course, there's an example. The fraudster that lies to you to manipulate you out of your money. I got it. You can't say anything. Fire in a theater. I get all that. Shoot him, George. We got to go. The cops are coming. I get it. You can't just say anything.
But it's really clever, though, because in George Orwell, that department
the Ministry of Truth, right?
But the mechanism that they used was called newspeak. That's what it was called. Newspeak.
That's right.
What they did is they altered language to reimagine or reinvent reality. And so it's what you say, you change the definition.
Yes.
It's the same terms, but you use them differently. So night is now day. And light is now dark. And you turn the truth on its head by simply altering language. And that's exactly what we're seeing through the use of clever slogans and the twisting of words to make
They did that with the word racism. They did that with so many words.
But disagreement is hate.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's disagreement. It's Isaiah 5:20. The prophet warned, woe to you who call evil good and good evil, who substitute night for day, day for night, bitter for sweet, sweet for bitter. The prophet's saying when your definitions get flipped on its head, be careful. Your society's in trouble and God's not pleased. And how are we not there? So I'm going back to Bukele. So he brings prosperity to his government. I quit counting. I quit following it. It's been a long time now. If you can look it up, I'm just curious.
He came into power in 2019.
I know, but he went 400 and something days, and maybe he got to 500, where there was no murder.
Well, so what he did
What
is
was the final count?
he arrested 81,000
Gang members.
people associated with gangs, and it dropped homicides precipitously. I mean, they virtually evaporated.
500 days without homicides under.
So
yeah.
So
and
he
then there was
created.
one, or they're still going.
So he and I think this is really kind of the American experiment. Really, is that you've had an environment where the ethos of the country, people around an ethos, a belief system, a common law that values God, self, and neighbor. Generally speaking, I didn't say everybody was born again Christian.
I got
Just
it.
keep your
Yep.
pants on if you're listening. Okay. What I'm saying is that this is a country founded on Judeo-Christian principles of loving God, self, and neighbor, or at least acknowledging that there is a God, and at some point we're going to be standing before Him. We're going to have to give an account. That's what the founders believe.
Yep.
And so
Most of them.
there's been a sense of respect for self and neighbor, regardless of what religion. You could even be irreligious altogether. But that's been a kind of glue, a sociological glue that's kept the country together, right? And it's kept us moving in a generally healthy direction for a long time. And there's no question that that's fragmented significantly. And when that fragments, then you're not looking out for your neighbor anymore. No. Then it's all about you. And look around. Can you not tell? I mean, really, look at Instagram for a moment. Look at TikTok. Look at Facebook. Make the case that it's not really all about you. It's all about you, right? And so we've now sort of turned inward, and we are our own authority. I look out for self, baby. It's not about my neighbor anymore. And so how long will a culture stay stable with that kind of new ethos? And that's worrisome. And yeah, we could make that argument from crime. We can do that all day long. You're going to see a fragmented culture. And then what I'm worried about is that it's going to take significantly more repressive measures to get society back to order. We never think about that kind of stuff. But study the 20th century. It's replete with stories about dictators and totalitarian regimes. Let's be good stewards of the American
I want
system.
a full circle with Bukele really
sakes.
quick. The great points, George, you're making. Spot on. We're going to wrap up. But Bukele, over 500 days without a murder.
As of September 11th, 2024, it was 700 days without homicides. I just sent
That's
you that.
insane. For the murder capital of his region to over 700 days without a homicide. And guess what? His people reelected him by 85% plus. Right, George? We talked about that. Was it 85%, 87%, something like that? It was insane. Yes. It's insane. And guess what's flourishing? Tourism.
Yeah.
The people flourish. When a righteous man is in control, what does Scripture say? The people rejoice. They're rejoicing. How would you not rejoice? And so,
Exactly.
I mean, just again, yes, we know it was harsh measures, but it was a harsh circumstance. All that to say is there was a set of ideas that he implemented, and it was rough. But look, we're going to talk more about politics. We're 38 days away.
Oh, no, it's like 27 days?
Did I skip a couple
28,
days?
27?
No.
Yes. We're under the 30-day mark.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it was 5th was 30 days. I'm sorry. Correct. It's 27 days away.
Yeah.
It's the 8th.
So we're about 26,
Is it the 8th or
27,
9th?
somewhere in there.
Yeah. No, it's 10th. It says the 10th. It says 27 days.
I'm just waiting for friggin' them to say broken water pipe in Georgia. So we got to.
Oh, I don't know about that. We'll see. Look, people need to vote. The church needs to vote. I pray that the church dwindles down that 55 million. What an embarrassing number.
Of Christians.
Way more than half Christians don't vote.
I
Embarrassing.
I
And
speculate.
irresponsible.
I speculate it's because they have this weird mindset of, well, everyone in the Bible didn't vote, so therefore, I think that's their stupid.
They didn't have a
conclusion.
constitutional republic.
Right.
I'm really going to need to check out those stats. They fascinate me. I think the 15 million number is correct. I think that's correct.
People of credibility, I haven't looked at it, but you can
there's no
check
source.
it out.
There's no
Well,
source.
check it out. I mean,
that's
figure
the
it out.
problem. I've seen it cited, and I need to know what that source is, because the generally accepted number on the total number of evangelicals who vote is usually 40 million people, about 40 million of them.
Well,
And
40
how
out
can
of
40
9
million not vote, unless the Christian definition is anybody who identifies themselves as Christian and not necessarily evangelicals. You with me? Yeah. So it's the number of evangelicals that typically are leading the vote. Christians who are voting, that's about 40 million evangelicals. So it can't be all of them. So what is that? Maybe it's all those people who identify as Christian. Maybe
I don't know.
But
Can that be your
yes,
homework?
I need to. I need
Check
to,
it out, George. Please
I need to
report
find-
back to us
I need
soon.
to find out.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for
But it's a
joining.
lot. It's way too
It's
many
a lot.
people.
We're going to talk about some of these issues. Christians are pissed off at Trump for his change in stance on abortion. We'll talk about that as the weeks go on. We really need to get on the books, do our pastor series and get pastors on here to talk about church, how they handle politics in their church. I think those are good conversations. Uncomfortable. Maybe some will not say yes to our invitation, but they need to. I think they should and talk about it, because I think every church should be able to talk about politics and what that means and issues and how do they address them in their church, because I'm sure there's questions. People are hungry for direction, and the shepherd should be leading the flock. If you are given that responsibility, that's a huge position of stewardship.
And I just want to say, I do not believe that Trump has changed his stance on abortion. I believe what he's done is he's changed the approach against the pro-abortion lobby. That's what
We'll
I believe.
talk. Save it for the conversation.
Yeah, we'll
I don't
talk
know.
about that on Saturday.
I'm telling you. Well, okay, we'll talk about that Saturday on Sidebar. But also, we'll talk about that, I'm sure, on our rated as
Because
time
it
goes
is an
on.
election issue. I mean, it's not anywhere near the top, but it is an election issue.
Yeah, it is. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. Share this with someone you think may benefit from it. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Make a comment. Let us know if there's a topic you want us to handle as time goes on. Pray, get involved, educate yourself, influence others, and ultimately vote the Bible. God bless you guys. Bye bye.